Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty of drug development. Kind of that journey a drug takes from a promising molecule in the lab all the way to that big IND application, that investigational new drug application.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of that roadmap from the early eureka moments in the lab to all those studies that you need to convince the regulators that a drug is safe and effective enough to actually go into humans.
We've got a lot of research and notes to dig through, so let's dive right in. I'm particularly interested in how this whole process kind of scales up. You start with a candidate drug, but then what?
Well, it's not as simple as just making more of it. The jump from kind of that laboratory scale to something that you can use in clinical trials is huge.
So it's not just bigger beakers then.
Definitely not. It's about planning and execution. Scaling up preclinical research involves a whole bunch of activities from refining the drug synthesis process all the way to conducting those rigorous in vitro and in vivo studies.
Okay, hold on. Break that down for me. In vitro versus in vivo. What's the difference?
Right. So in vitro studies are those that are done in very controlled environments. Think test tubes and petri dishes. And they help us understand a drug's basic properties, how it interacts with its target, how stable it is, and any potential toxicity.
So it's kind of like a first look at a drug's personality, and then in vivo is where you kind of bring in the real-world complexity.
Yeah, exactly. In vivo studies involve testing the drug in living organisms, usually animal models. And this helps us see how it behaves in a more complex system. This is where we get a grasp of how the drug is absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated, all that ADME stuff.
Got it. So you're building that comprehensive understanding of the drug's actions before you even think about humans, but how do you even begin to scale up something that started in a tiny vial in the lab?
Right. Well, that's where pilot batch manufacturing comes in. It's kind of a crucial bridge between the lab scale synthesis and large-scale production. It's like a dress rehearsal for the real manufacturing process.
Okay, so you're making a small batch of the drug, but using methods that are closer to what a pharmaceutical company would use.
Exactly. Pilot batches help us optimize those manufacturing processes, test different formulations, and get enough material for those preclinical and early clinical studies. And this is actually a great example of how regulatory strategy kind of influences preclinical planning.
Oh, tell me more about that. I'm guessing the FDA has a lot to say about how these drugs are made, even in these early stages.
Absolutely. Understanding the regulatory guidelines is key. For example, the FDA requires very detailed information about the manufacturing process, the quality control measures, and the stability data.
So researchers are always checking their work against the regulatory rulebook. That's got to be a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. It is. You need to push the boundaries of innovation
Right.
while staying within that regulatory framework. And all that meticulous planning and documentation is crucial for eventually filing that IND, that investigational new drug application.
Speaking of the IND, from what I understand, it's that big document that gets submitted to the FDA, right? What exactly goes into that massive file?
It's a pretty comprehensive package. It tells the story of the drug's preclinical journey. It includes details about the drug's chemistry, how it's manufactured data from all those non-clinical pharmacology and toxicology studies, and the proposed plan for clinical trials.
Wow, it's like compiling all the research and data and plans into one single narrative, no pressure.
Right. It is a huge undertaking. And a key part of that story is demonstrating that you've thoroughly assessed the drug's safety profile.
Right, because ultimately it's all about ensuring patient safety. So let's talk more about how researchers identify and mitigate potential risks during this preclinical phase. One term I keep coming across is reactive metabolites. Those sound kind of concerning.
They can be. Reactive metabolites are byproducts of drug metabolism that can sometimes cause adverse reactions. It's not just about how quickly a drug is cleared from the body, but also what it leaves behind.
Okay, now that does sound concerning.
Yeah.
What kind of trouble can these reactive metabolites cause?
Well, they can trigger a whole range of issues, from damaging the liver to interfering with DNA, or even prompting the immune system to attack healthy cells.
That's a whole cascade of potential problems. So how do researchers even begin to predict and manage these risks, especially early on?
It's a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
One key strategy is early assessment of the drug's potential to form these reactive metabolites. This often involves using really sophisticated analytical techniques like mass spectrometry to identify and characterize those byproducts.
Mass spectrometry, that sounds pretty high-tech. Paint me a picture. How does that work?
It's like a molecular fingerprint scanner. Imagine you've got this mixture of molecules and you want to know exactly what's in there and how much of each one is present. Mass spectrometry helps us separate and identify those molecules based on their mass and charge, and that gives us a detailed picture of the drug and its metabolites.
It's like having a molecular detective on the case, breaking down the clues and revealing the hidden dangers. But it's not just about identifying those risky metabolites,
Right.
right? You also have to figure out how to manage them.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's about tweaking the drug structure, optimizing its formulation, or even exploring different routes of administration to minimize the formation of those problematic byproducts.
So it's a constant process of refining and optimizing. But tell me, isn't there a risk that all this focus on safety and regulation stifles innovation? How do researchers find that balance between being cautious and pushing the boundaries?
That's a great question, and one that's really at the heart of drug development.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really is a constant challenge finding that balance between innovation and making sure everything is safe and rigorous, you know. On the one hand, you want to explore new things, develop those groundbreaking treatments, but on the other hand, you have that responsibility to, to ensure patient safety, to really carefully assess and mitigate the potential risks.
So it's not just about making a drug that works, it's about making one that works safely.
Exactly, and that's where things get really interesting. It's a very dynamic process, a constant back and forth between discovery and validation. Researchers are always looking for ways to improve that process, to make it more efficient, more predictive, and ultimately more patient-centered.
That makes me think of something I was reading about the use of AI in drug development. It feels like AI has the potential to really change things up.
AI is definitely a game changer. We're already seeing its impact in various stages, from early drug discovery to preclinical testing, even clinical trial design.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more about how AI is being used in these early stages.
Well, one of the most exciting areas is in predicting potential drug toxicity. AI algorithms can look at huge amounts of data, on chemical structures, metabolic pathways, and toxicity profiles, and it can flag those potential red flags really early on. It's like having a super-powered research assistant that can go through mountains of information and spot those problems before they even show up.
So it's like catching those reactive metabolites we talked about earlier. But even before a drug is even made, they could save so much time and resources.
Exactly. It lets researchers focus on the most promising candidates, the ones with the best chance of success and the lowest risk of causing any harm.
That makes a lot of sense. But I have to ask, isn't there a risk of becoming too reliant on these algorithms?
Hmm.
They're only as good as the data they're trained on, right?
That's a very valid point. AI is a powerful tool, but it's not magic. Human expertise is still absolutely essential. It's about using AI to enhance our understanding, to identify patterns and generate hypotheses that we might not have considered otherwise.
So it's a partnership, AI and human intelligence working together to make that drug development process better.
Precisely. And that partnership goes beyond just predicting toxicity. AI is also being used to optimize drug formulations, to design better preclinical studies, and even to streamline the regulatory review process.
Okay, let's talk about the regulatory side of things. How is AI impacting the way the FDA reviews these IND applications?
It's still early days, but the potential is huge. Imagine being able to automate the analysis of those massive regulatory dossiers we talked about. AI could help ensure completeness flag any inconsistencies and even highlight areas that need more clarification. That would free up regulatory reviewers to focus on the more complex scientific and ethical considerations.
So it sounds like AI could make the whole process more efficient and more transparent, which would benefit everyone, especially those patients who are waiting for new treatments.
Exactly. It's about using technology to streamline the process without compromising on safety or rigor.
This has all been incredibly fascinating, but let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture. We've talked about scaling up research, navigating the regulatory landscape, and embracing new technologies. But at the end of the day, what's the ultimate goal of all this effort?
It's all about getting those safe and effective treatments to the patients who need them every step in the process, from those eureka moments in the lab to planning those clinical trials, is driven by that desire to improve human health and well-being.
That's what makes this whole field so inspiring. It's this constant drive to innovate, to overcome challenges, and ultimately to make a difference in people's lives.
You've hit the nail on the head, and that brings us to a really crucial point, the importance of patient engagement in the drug development process. It's not enough to just develop new drugs. We need to make sure they actually meet the needs of the people they're intended to help.
That makes perfect sense. How are researchers working to bring those patient perspectives into this complex process?
One key strategy is involving patients in the design of clinical trials by getting their input on things like study endpoints, outcome measures, even the overall trial design. We can ensure that the research questions we're asking are relevant to patients' lived experiences.
So it's about shifting from a we know best approach to a more collaborative one, where patients are seen as partners in the research process.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that patients are the ultimate experts in their own health and that their perspectives are so valuable in shaping the future of drug development.
That's a powerful idea and one that seems to be gaining traction in the field. But let's not forget that that journey from the lab bench to the patient's bedside is long and complex.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing researchers today as they navigate this intricate process?
Oh, there are certainly many hurdles to overcome. One of the biggest challenges is the sheer complexity of biological systems.
Right, you can't just test a drug in a petri dish and assume it'll act the same way in a human.
Exactly. And that's why preclinical testing is so crucial. We need good models that can accurately predict how a drug will behave in humans. But even the most sophisticated models have limitations.
So it's about finding that balance between innovation and caution, pushing the boundaries while always keeping patient safety in mind.
Absolutely. And that takes a deep understanding of the science, a keen awareness of the regulatory landscape, and a real commitment to patient-centered research.
It's a tall order, but it sounds incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what are some of the emerging trends that you think will shape the future of drug development? What should we be keeping our eyes on?
Well, one trend that I find particularly exciting is the rise of precision medicine, the idea of tailoring treatments to an individual's unique genetic makeup and lifestyle.
Yeah, precision medicine, that's the idea of kind of moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to treatment, right? Sounds kind of like science fiction, but also incredibly promising.
It is. It's definitely a paradigm shift. Imagine a world where treatments are tailored to your specific genetic profile, your lifestyle, even your environmental exposures. It's about maximizing how well the treatment works and minimizing those side effects, truly personalized medicine.
That's incredible, but I imagine it also raises some pretty complex questions. How do you even begin to collect and analyze that much individual data? And what about the ethical implications, access, privacy? Those are all big things to consider.
You're absolutely right. Precision medicine relies a lot on big data and advanced analytics. We're talking about looking at vast amounts of genomic information, clinical records, even lifestyle data from things like wearable devices. It's a huge task, but the
Yeah.
potential benefits are enormous.
So it's not just about developing new drugs. It's about understanding how those drugs interact with an individual's unique biology. It's like taking drug development to a whole new level.
Exactly, and that's what's so exciting. We're starting to see things like targeted therapies, drugs designed to work on very specific genetic subtypes of diseases. This is especially promising in areas like cancer treatment, where we're moving away from those broad chemotherapy approaches and going for more precise and less toxic options.
That's amazing. So instead of attacking all rapidly dividing cells, you're going after the specific mutations that are driving the cancer. That's got to be a
Yeah.
huge change for patients.
It is. We're also seeing progress in using precision medicine to predict how someone will respond to a drug. Imagine being able to know in advance if a particular drug is likely to work for you or if you're at risk for certain side effects.
That would completely change the way we prescribe and use medications. It would make the whole process so much more efficient and less trial and error.
Exactly. But as you mentioned earlier, there are some really big ethical and logistical challenges to overcome: data privacy, access to these advanced technologies, and making sure everyone has equal access to these personalized treatments are all crucial things to think about.
It sounds like precision medicine is a powerful tool, but one that needs to be used very responsibly. It's not just about the science, it's about how it affects society as a whole.
Well said. It's a multifaceted issue that requires a lot of careful thought and open discussion between scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public.
This has been an amazing journey. We've covered so much, from the details of scaling up preclinical research to the incredible potential of AI and precision medicine. It's clear that drug development is such a complex and ever-changing field.
It certainly is, but it's also a field that's driven by this deep sense of purpose, the desire to alleviate suffering and improve people's lives.
And it's been an absolute pleasure to dive into these topics with you today. I always learn so much from our deep dives.
The pleasure is all mine. It's great to see your enthusiasm and curiosity.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some new insights into the amazing world of drug development and all the incredible innovations that are shaping the future of medicine. Until next time, keep those brains engaged and those questions coming.